Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about Phoenix Wright and Professor Layton's strange crossover versus game. Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney by Capcom Level 5 and probably a little Nintendo, since Nintendo basically has been handling Professor Layton for America, so I'm sure they had to get involved. So the physical case looks alright. Actually is some paper in here, but it is just a little fold out, mainly with warnings. That's all the real instructions you get. Just shocking, they're in color. And similar to Professor Layton games, you get told there is download content, which I wonder if that's going to continue the same like Professor Layton games, because hackers have actually revealed that at least the original DS games, all the additional download puzzles were actually on the cartridges and were only being basically unlocked, which was really odd. I don't know about the 3DS ones, and I don't know if this one's going to retain that similar kind of thing. Interestingly enough, and I always claimed it, so I'm not really worried about it if you can see it, which you probably won't be able to, but in the case you can see there's some Club Nintendo stuff, so I kind of peeked back there, and they put the Club Nintendo code down inside. One person might say lazy. I have to say, not a bad use of extra space, to be honest. Personally, I'd rather it be kind of interestingly designed, like, for example, the Final Fantasy music game having characters in the little hole areas, but admittedly, it's a lot better than the cautionary shit being there, as in some of the console releases have been doing, with clear cases having it. But of course, some people might not really look for the Nintendo code back there, so it's also odd placement. I mean, it's a bit odd. But anyway, so the real catch, the game. Obviously, being a combination of Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright, the game obviously is combining their gameplay together. But in what facets are being combined and what facets of the games are being thrown out the window? Well, the game starts off with a prologue for both characters. People familiar with Professor Layton will be treated first to a lot of familiar things of Professor Layton. But quickly, some of the Phoenix Wright stuff starts invading. Some of the sound effects used during the court, like when objections and things are turning, or shocked effects. Some of this stuff is actually used during Professor Layton's part of the story. And obviously, since the characters are going to be interacting, it's going to make sense why. But it kind of might be a little jarring to anyone who's played both franchises. If you're new and unfamiliar with one of these franchises or both these franchises, it probably won't be as annoying, but it might be a little jarring, but it's not anything that destroys the game at all. It doesn't destroy the game. So your delightfully stellar prologue is both characters, and it basically function just like their games. Now, the only real big difference I've noticed in Professor Layton's kind of style is that a lot of the puzzles, with only a few exceptions, have actually been function with the analog stick in the plus pad, which is not something as far as the original DS titles. Please be aware, actually, I should probably mention, I have not played any of the 3DS Professor Layton games, so I don't know if they have done this, but the original DS titles did not use the plus pad for puzzles. You used the touch screen for all your puzzle needs. And there's only a few puzzles I found that the touch screen is a necessity, but many of the puzzles allow you to use the analog stick or the plus pad, which is nice, because obviously some people, options is never a bad thing, but at the same time, I kind of feel like it caters to forcing some of the puzzles to be a certain style in a way. Now, kind of like the Souls game, it's kind of hard to say if the puzzles are harder or easier, because I mean, I've played 4 Professor Layton games. I mean, you have... Well, no, wait. Is it 3 or 4? Wait. No, 3. Yeah, 3, because the third game was the Spectral game, wasn't it? Or was that the 4th? I don't remember. But, point stands. The graphics have, I do know that the 3DS titles have been upgraded into 3D, so the game with Phoenix Wright and that, it's all in 3D with the models. And I was, when I first heard about the first 3DS title for Professor Layton, I was slightly concerned about... No, wait, there was 4, because you have Curious Village, the Pandora's Box, yeah, I know, I just kind of pulled that out now. Well, then Unwound Future, and then Spectre. So Spectre was the 4th one. So I was thinking, right, there were 4 on the original. Ha-ha! My memory has finally not failed me. But anyway. What was I again now? But the 3D models on all the characters, it actually looks alright. I thought it was going to look really weird for the Professor Layton characters, but admittedly, it actually turned out to be the other way around. A lot of the Phoenix Wright characters seem kind of odd to me, and the Professor Layton characters actually seem very normal in 3D. And that's probably more because of the simple design as opposed to Phoenix Wright's more detailed look. I remember a long time ago when it was still just in Japan. It hadn't came out to Europe because Europe got this before us for some freaking reason. Oh, Nintendo being very favorish to the Europeans again. But anyway, that's not a bad thing for Europeans though. I'd just say. But anyway, I do remember there was an article talking about trying to balance details between the 2 characters, because they're different art styles, obviously. The Professor Layton series obviously focuses a lot on the lesser detail and more unique aspects of the characters, while Phoenix Wright has a lot more detail to the clothing and that. And the article basically talked about in simple that they dumbed down Phoenix detail and they upped Professor Layton's detail a little bit. So that would probably make sense why Professor Layton actually looks more natural, because he wasn't changed to a lower quality. He was actually made to look better. While Phoenix Down was dumbed down to be a bit more on par, so they didn't stick out so much. So that could be the case, but, there's other things in that, the aesthetic designs and such. I mean, they're 2 completely different designs of artistic styles. So, and going from 2D 3D, that does so many different things to a character. The more detail, the more that can vastly change. So that's going to vary from person to person. It's nothing that destroys the game, though. It just kind of seems odd to me. But after Professor Layton's initial prologue, Phoenix Wright is introduced, and he's coming to London for a special trial, which is of course going to be a tutorial trial for you in London, which is part of some crossover kind of project basically. And you get introduced to the main character that's focused around the story in both prologues. She gets introduced to the characters, and they get sucked into a whole story of what's going on. Now, I am going to try and do as minimal spoilers as possible. So, I'm going to try and only relate to stuff that trailers and stuff have, talked about, and not go into, obviously, like, who's guilty in certain cases. I've only done the first witch trial, and, being a first impression, I wanted to do the witch trial, because it's different from Phoenix Wright's normal trial. It's supposed to introduce new elements, so I obviously wanted to do the first witch trial before doing a first impressions of the game. So, it seems like a lot of the map traveling is just simply using Professor Layton's map, going around through the maps and that. So travel is solely based off Professor Layton's system, why Phoenix's choose location system was kicked out for his, probably for more realistic design, since Phoenix Wright's traveling system is just picking a bunch of names. But once the characters converge in the town that the game takes place in, you'll eventually get rolled into the forced witch trial, and that is probably what this is mainly going to focus on, because what is there really to say more about Professor Layton's elements of doing puzzles? Puzzles vary on the puzzles themselves, and you find the puzzles when investigating. So there's not really anything different at all, to be honest, aside from the addition of having the ability to use the analog stick or the plus pad with most of the puzzles. So there's really nothing new. The hint coins are still there. Now with Phoenix Wright, there's a lot of new stuff. Hint coins can be used in the case to help point you in the right direction, kind of shove you, these are the things you need to focus on, but it doesn't outright tell you. At most, I did try one hint coin during the witch trial, and it told me who to talk to, and it basically gave me 2 things to present to them. So it didn't outright tell me, but it gravely limited the choices, so it was more simple. So I'm sure people who say they have a lot of trouble with Phoenix Wright's trials are going to like that, because it only costed 1 hint coin, but I only did it once, so I don't know if it builds up after so many times. They work just like they did in Professor Layton games, though, for his stuff. You use them, you get hints for the puzzles. It really seems like the game's leaning more on Phoenix Wright's gameplay than Professor Layton's. I did hear there's a vastly lesser puzzles in this game because of that. But moving on, Professor Layton is still, even though his gameplay might be a little more overshadowed over Phoenix Wright's, he is still a very prominent character in gathering information, and in the trials a very prominent point of view of what's going on. So the witch trial. The witch trial has some functionality that's very reminiscent of trials you've done before, but there are many new additions. Some I like, and there was a few issues with them at the same time. So the first thing that was announced about the witch trials when this game was released in Japan was the mob witnesses. So the whole thing was that all these witnesses would at one time be throwing all their ideals and what they think is going on at Phoenix, and that he would have to juggle all these ideas around and figure out the truth, as opposed to, normal law where it's in an orderly manner. You got all these mobs is like, oh, guilty, Bono, she's a witch, she's a witch, because it's a witch trial. But now, what I do like is having these multiple witnesses actually add a interesting element to all the chatter, because on the one, basically, in Phoenix Wright, you had the prosecutor, yourself, and the witness. So usually it was just a 3-way conversation. The first trial, not to go into spoilers of the characters, who's the murderer and such, you start off with 4 witnesses, and they all play off in different ways. And they have different information that's correct, wrong, counters each other and that. One of the elements kind of reminds me of an element from Apollo's Justice. One of the main new elements in Apollo's Justice court system was being able to look at the witnesses to see if there was anything wrong with them. Well, this system might be kind of implemented, but I kind of feel like it's kind of not, because there's a sound cue for it, so it kind of sounds like a missed opportunity at the same time. But later in the game it could be used that way, but I don't think it's going to end up. But it could be. Could be, never force questions. But basically, during sworn testimonies of the different people, you can basically, somebody might have something to say about that. Like somebody might say, well, I thought so-and-so went down to the well over there. And then Mr. McBob might be going, wait a minute, I saw so-and-so go down that path. And it can cause fights and conflictions between the other people, the witnesses. And that's kind of an interesting element. Now, the thing I kind of don't like in that new idea is that, in Phoenix Wright, when you try to desperately figure out what the fuck to do next, because everyone eventually hits a brick wall and everyone has different times. Some people find one thing so easy to realize and another thing is a little difficult with them, while another person that might be reversed or something. So obviously everyone's going to have a different type of brick wall, but at some point everyone hits a brick wall. And when it's involved in this, trying to figure it out, you're going through all these different people. So, like, let's say you found out this guy has a statement that everyone, all the witnesses, have something to add towards it. So, you talk to him, go through all his animations, get to the statement, then you select the first person, do all his stuff and say, and then be like, no more there. Then you go back to that guy, go back to his statement while he's doing all his animations, talk to the next person, and do it again, 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 until you get through all the dialogue. And then, if that still doesn't do anything, but that has to do with what's going on, then you're constantly going through all those people's dialogue in their animations over and over again, trying to figure out what the fuck to do. Phoenix Wright already has, lots of dialogue to go through, and when you're stumped, you're going through it a lot of times. So this adds a lot more additional stuff. So if that bothered you, this new mechanic might get annoying. And the 3D models, I mean, like Phoenix and that, they don't feel problematic. But some of the characters, like the prosecutor knight in the first witch trial, I find it so annoying when he has this annoying slam thing he does into a desk. He starts with his arm up, and he's just like, ugh, into his desk with his other hand. And I know when you first see it, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but a lot of times, certain characters' repetitive animations get kind of annoying, because they're a little longer in their 3D form. In Phoenix Wright's 2D forms, that, they just have a lot of pointing and then they get to the talking. Some of the people just have a lot of slightly time-consuming animations. Not everyone, just a few characters so far. But when they're doing it multiple times and it's involved in repeated dialogue and that, it can get a little annoying. But, that's part of the course, sadly, in trying to figure out what's going on in the court case. Now, you seem to get a lot less evidence. The touchscreen doesn't provide as many spaces for evidence, so it looks like you won't be dealing with so much evidence like in some of the previous Phoenix Wright games. And so far, I haven't seen any of the cases involve the Keldo profiles, though they still are around, so they probably will be involved in later cases. The 3D mechanic with the later Phoenix Wright games, like the additional case in the first game and Apollo Justice, where you can look at the objects and spin them around. So far, there haven't been any items like that in this, but in the replacement, there are certain items. Again, there are like documents and stuff, like maps and that you can see. But there are certain items where you get a magnifying glass and you can look at the item getting a close-up on it. I haven't seen too many huge uses for this yet, but it looks like it will probably play a more important role in later cases, probably, hopefully. I want to see some good cases. Now, admittedly, I liked the twist to the Forced Witch case. It kind of reminded me that the big twist in finally figuring out and turning the case around kind of reminded me of the Turnabout Big Top, I believe the case was called. Well, it had to deal with the circus, and I won't be spoiling anything about it. But that's one of my favorite murderers, because I had figured out where the weapon was way before the court case finally got to the point, like, where's the murder weapon then, Mr. Phoenix? Provide the court. Well, it's like, I just love that realization. I had that exact same experience in the first witch trial. Just that realization of the critical but simple, obvious location where it was, but the critical evidence to prove the real culprit. And that's really good, because that's technically the second trial, but the first witch trial, and that's a pretty good sign to me. Hopefully the stories are going to continue to be good. Any other little differences? If you enjoyed the yelling features of the previous Phoenix Wrights, where you'd be like, hold it! Objection! Take that! You'll be sad that you cannot do that in this title, which is really odd. Because the 3DS does have a mic, so it's strange that you won't be able to do that. There are some new yell commands too, but, considering you can't actually yell, it's just, Phoenix Wright doing it. Doesn't seem very important to really note, but I guess throw it out for you. Overall, though, the trial system overall does work the same. Oh, wait, there is another thing you can present too. There's a book that Layton finds that tells you how magic spells are cast, since the witch trials have to do with magic. Obviously, brushing up on how magic spells work will help you in your cases of proving who's innocent and guilty and such. So you do actually get access to a book that shows you how spells and their ways of being cast and everything, so you could use that as evidence too. But that's basic. Though it's its own tab, it's just more evidence to present. And I think that's probably the kind of idea between your normal evidence and that. You're having less physical evidence, but you got more of these magic spells to kind of fill out the additional evidence. And I think that might be why there's less physical evidence that you would normally get. But overall, I mean, aside from that, it's not so far, unless there's new mechanics that are going to be introduced. It's not, the whole mob thing isn't like so different. It's just more witnesses at one time, and they have conflictions with each other sometimes that can work in your benefit in that. But a lot of times there's just a lot more chatter. Now, I went through pretty much all the chatter I could humanly possibly do in the witch trial, because I wanted to see all the goofy and stuff and the interactions between the characters and that. And by the time I finally finished the first witch trial, I had achieved 8 hours into this game. So I'm sure you could probably rush through that trial a lot faster and get a shorter time. But that's some lengthy time, and we barely started the game. Barely scratched the damn game, unless there was very few trials in this game, which I hope that's not the case. I mean, most Phoenix Wright games have, 4 or 5 cases, so... And with Professor Layton's gameplay and the thinking between his puzzles and that, I'm sure that's going to actually make some interesting waking up of time on there. It'd probably definitely be a good time killer. Now, there is voice acting. There is no Japanese option for voice acting if you want dual voice acting. And I already know there's a very conflicting issue going on with the Professor Layton community. Apparently, for some reason, Luke did not reprise his role for the American version of Luke. The European version of Luke's voice actor is filling that role. And, well, it's not necessarily confirmed he didn't want to redo his role. There's actually no confirmation on why. My personal theory is that it might be quite possible that we only just got the European version, just region code changed to function in our systems. And I don't have anything to back that up. I would have to actually see if I can find somebody who has some of the dialogue for the European version. Because if there's changed dialogue, then that indicates that war changes. But if all the dialogue seems the same in that, because Professor Layton has the same voice actor in both regions as far as I understand. And I believe this is the first real speaking role for Phoenix Wright in English. So I don't think that will have been an issue. I'm pretty sure it came out before Dual Destiny in Japan. And Dual Destiny I'm not sure if Dual Destiny. I'd have to look at the dates, but it's probably a pretty close fight either way. And I don't know. I don't even know if Dual Destiny has voice acting in it, actually, to be honest. It probably does, but I don't actually really know. But there is voice acting for a lot of the characters, and it's pretty well done. Now, if you were a big fan of Luke's American voice actor, yeah, it might be some conflictions though, because the European Luke is actually played by a girl, so he has a more feminish voice. Why the American Luke was kind of more of a stereotype British kind of voice. So, in my understanding, Europe didn't like the US voice, and American fans don't like the European voice. So, subject to change. It doesn't really bother me, to be honest. It's clearly different. It's nowhere similar at all. So it's definitely going to be jarring a little if you're very used to the U.S. voice actor. But I have not found an issue to get used to at all. But so far, I'm really enjoying the game. It does, like I said, seem more lean towards Phoenix. Man, I can't say anything too. Leaned more towards Phoenix Wright's gameplay style and that, but it has a lot of different elements picked from the two and combined together. Now, it is probably important to mention that way back when this game first came out in Japan, there were reports saying that it had very low sales. Not low to where they were bad for a game, but low when compared to the series, like both of them, Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright. It was basically considered the lowest selling entry if you counted both franchises and compared them to it. And I can kind of see maybe why that is, because I do feel like the Professor Layton puzzles are easier. But like I said, they could have kind of a Souls kind of syndrome issue if you're familiar with the franchise. You know, you're familiar with the trickery, mindfuckery sometimes they do to you with some of the wording and that. You know, over time, it's kind of hard to tell if it's really hard or if you're just really used to what's trying to pull the rug out from under your feet. And that's a bit of a difficult call. But I personally do feel they're easier, but subjective. Phoenix Wright stuff, the first initial trial plays like his games exactly, but the Witch trial does have different elements to it, and it has a lot more talking. But it was a pretty exciting trial. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing the next one, which always I got to see. I did some of the story after the trial, so I always basically know what the setup for the trial is. So it's only going to be interesting, since the next trial always sounds like something you would think to be the climax or near the end of the game, and we barely started the game, so I don't even know what the fuck the climax is going to seem like in that. But I'm enjoying it. The voice acting's nice. The story's well done so far on that. And of course, it's just nice that we actually got a physical version of the game, unlike the Dual Destinies where we didn't. We just got a digital version, which was such a shame. So I really feel like Nintendo probably put more of their money into our version than Capcom did, because Level 5 doesn't have a strong presence in America. It's just trying to do that. And Capcom obviously didn't give a shit about getting a physical, so I'm pretty sure it was Nintendo to the rescue when it came to that. So thank you, Nintendo, for giving us a physical version of this game. Please, thank you, and get Fatal Frame out there as well on the Wii U shelves, please. But anyway, I enjoyed the game. Now, at this point, I want to actually talk about the Witch Trial in more depth, which means spoilers. So, yeah, I recommend the game. Go check it out. It's only $29. So if you got a 3DS, why not? I don't know why it's so cheap, but hey, you can't beat that in my opinion. Unless this game is super short, that doesn't look like a loss to me. So anyway, Force Witch Trial. So the Force Witch Trial is really lengthy. There's a lot of dialogue. Professor Layton's involved. Maya's involved. Luke's involved. The judge is a prick. Even in oddly reminiscent of Phoenix Wright's judge. It's like a medieval version of him. And the prosecutor's a prick too, of course. And all your freaking your testimony witnesses, all jackasses too. It's really interesting because in Phoenix Wright's courts, you know, there's doubt and a lot of mudslinging and that, but this really is trying to build a whole witch trial kind of feel. And if you don't know anything about witch trials, basically, if you got accused of being a witch, you were basically screwed because everyone wanted you dead. No, they want a lot of people in your corner to be like, oh, you people are just fucking idiots and want to burn someone. People would just go, burn. It's like, witch, burn. There was no fucking logic or anything thrown around or that. So, there was a lot of basically the prosecutor, the witnesses, and the random chatter in the courtroom. There's a lot of, we don't basically give a fuck unless you have evidence in there. And there's a lot of, and obviously since the game is in more of a medieval setting, you can't rely on fingerprints and a lot of technology things. So you have to really use a lot more logic and evidence, really. And sadly, a lot of it gets thrown in your face again when characters come up with weird... Basically, one of the primary items that come involved in the Force Witch case is the Witch's Staff, which is a requirement to cast a spell that the mortal, what was used in the mortal. And it had the ability to turn invisible as well. And basically, like, a good chunk of the trial is just trying to explain how she has kept it on her. Because it was found on the ground after the mortal. So, a lot of it's just trying to prove she was holding it or somehow had it on her and somehow grabbed it or that. And it's just very, very, very... That's why I want to put it, just... a lot of just questioning of that. Because, I mean, like, you're trying to use logic, but at the same time, it's like, well... I just don't have the word to describe the idiocy that some of them come up with of that. So, you are aiming for logic, but at the same time, that logic doesn't always play out in your favor. You're basically dealing with a bunch of ignorant people that just want to just randomly accuse somebody and burn them. Like, they're willing to ignore really putting any effort or work into figuring out what's really going on and just burn the person and go on with their daily lives. I mean, the beginning of the trial really goes like that. Okay, can we just get the verdict and I go back to my business and that? Now, the big turning point in it, obviously, as per the usual that Phoenix Wright usually ends up doing, is that one of the other people involved in the case turned out to be the murderer, of course. So, one of the witnesses actually is the murderer, but shockingly, it's actually done in an interesting way as opposed to normally just stumbling in it. Basically, you're told multiple times there were 4 witnesses to the case, but then once the case seems like it's about to end, a new witness appears. And this witness claims he also witnessed, so that had 5 witnesses. But all the other witnesses say there was only 4 witnesses. So that brings up the conclusion that somebody's lying for some reason. Which eventually leads into the purpose that that person who's lying is possibly the murderer, and leads to the murder, and that it was really enjoyable case. It definitely was enjoyable, but it was really long. So, of course, per se, to a normal Phoenix Wright game, you know, you still have the ability to save and that, and it kind of went back to the little explanation mark system. No, wait. The original system used the green health bar, didn't it? Yeah, I think the original used the green health bar. Well, either way, it uses the multiple icon system for penalties. So, you only have so many penalties you can be dueled out. I got like 2 penalties during the forced witch hunt. But, and also, it's probably also good to note that you lose points for losing those. The point system for Professor Layton's game, whatever of those you make to the end of the trial get converted into those. So, if you want a really high score, you gotta keep that in mind too. But I've never really been concerned about those because they don't primarily really do anything, but usually end up being bragging rights, really. In the end, I just gotta say, so far I am really enjoying the game. The interactions between Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright are really enjoyable, and it's just really, it's really just hilarious. And wait until Professor Layton meets Phoenix Wright. It's just so hilarious how they meet. It's just, I fucking died laughing how they meet. That was so fucking funny. Oh, man. But, again, I have to reiterate, it's only $29, which is an awesome deal. I can't believe it's that cheap, really. I would have expected it a bit, at least $39, so it's kind of odd it's that cheap. But it's only $29 in America. Now, I'm not sure how much it is in Europe, but either way, I enjoy it. I recommend it. If you liked Professor Layton, if you liked Phoenix Wright, or if you like both, I think you'll like it. And I want to also mention, if you're only a fan of one of the franchises and never touched the other one, this could be an interesting way to also be kind of introduced to the other, which is usually the primary point of a lot of crossover games, to get that other side's fans introduced to your game and get them interested in buying those games of that franchise, and the ideas, to work both ways. That's usually a primary reason for crossover games. And I think it could be interestingly used that way, since so far, there might be like jokingly references to their events in their past games. I haven't seen any direct references yet, so I don't think you really need the backstory, like, the big backstory to really get into them. So it might be an interesting way to be introduced to either franchise. But like I said, the game does feel like it leans more towards Phoenix Wright's gameplay than Professor Layton's. But Professor Layton's is still there. But I hope, like I said, I hope it has less puzzles than that, obviously because he's sharing the spotlight. So the balance could be considered different. Either way, recommend. Sorry that maybe said recommend way too many times, but I'm really enjoying this, and I definitely am probably going to be playing a good bit of this on my flights to going to Salt Lake Comic-Con, which is only a few days away. Technically it's 4 days, but I'll be leaving in 3 days, if you count today. If you don't count today, I got 2 more days. But either way, I enjoyed the game. Go get it if you're a fan of either one. I recommend it. It's pretty enjoyable. Just keep in mind that there might be a few little differences if you play the actual main entries, but pretty good similarities. I definitely recommend it as a first impressions. And hopefully, we'll get a review out. We'll get a review out there at some point. So until next time, praise the sun, because a true gentleman leaves no sun unpraised.